With all the COVID-19 stuff that's going on and all the changes, I thought it was important to do an update to this video before I start the actual travel guide. COVID-19 precautions will affect Glacier in 2020. So everyone planning a trip this year should check with the park's website often for updates. This is a fluid situation, and things are changing quickly and frequently. I'm recording this on June 14th, and here's the highlights of what we know. Let's start with getting into the park. The east side gateways, well, they're not open at all due to restrictions imposed by the Blackfeet tribe, who are trying to protect their people on their reservation, which borders the east side of the park. And before you get too upset, please understand that the Navajo Nation has been severely affected by COVID-19, presumably because it was brought to the Navajo Nation by visitors to Monument Valley and their other natural wonders. Well, the Blackfeet tribe, they're just trying to protect their people. Negotiations are underway, but no opening dates have been set. Check with the park website or call your hotel for the latest information. Okay, here are some other changes. There will be no Hiker Shuttles in 2020 because of social distancing and, well, frankly, getting park staff. There will be no Hiker Shuttles in 2020. And red bus tours? Well, they're still in limbo. They may open as early as July 15th or even the end of June, but right now, negotiations are still ongoing. And many campgrounds are closed for the season. Backcountry permits are still being accepted, but again, this is a fluid situation. The cabins in many Glacier are some of my favorite places to stay in the park, but this year, the cabins without bathrooms will not be available for the season. And throughout the park, it looks like meal service will be restricted to takeout, if it's available at all. And because the park staff is being reduced, this may affect trail opening dates. So check the park's trail status page to see when the trails will be open. And the boat tours are a great way to enjoy the park, and for many years they've been pointing people to my videos, so I'm quite happy with them. So I like to talk about the boat tours, but this year they're not available. Again, I just want to say that this is a fluid situation. These are just some of the changes because of COVID-19. It's very important to check with the website or call ahead, as things are likely to change and there's likely to be a few impacts that I'm not aware of and have not mentioned. Okay, now I'm going to start the actual video. This is Steve again, and as you know, Glacier is my favorite national park, and I've been to most of them. I've produced several videos on the park, including 2 90 or so minute travel guides that have a great amount of detail about specific parts of the park, like the Going to the Sun Road, the park's lodges, and the park's most popular trails. I wrote this video to introduce this fantastic place to future visitors and to provide you with the info that you need to make the most of your trip, especially but not necessarily if you're a hiker. Because I think everyone should experience my favorite park. It has everything for the person who loves the outdoors and nature. There's a beautiful drive, mountains, lakes, streams, broad valleys, diverse wildlife, and of course, glaciers. But my favorite part is the over 700 miles of trails that help you experience it all. You probably know that I produced a 90-minute documentary/travel guide called Glacier, the Hiker National Park. It covers lodging and the Sun Road and other basics, and it also takes a very detailed look at several of the park's most popular trails. The park has trails for everyone, even if you're in a wheelchair. If you're a backpacker, Glacier has great multi-day backcountry hikes, but permits are required for those, and there are a limited number of backcountry camping permits. Most people have heard of the Appalachian Trail, but did you know there's also a Continental Divide Trail? The 3,100-mile trail begins in Mexico and goes all the way to Glacier National Park and then on to Canada. A few of my favorite glacier trails are actually part of this monster trail. I'll show you a hiking plan for a 1-week stay. I'll also provide alternatives because weather, bears, and Mother Nature's other influences don't really care that you really want to do a trail on a certain day. Nature is in charge here, and she's going to do what she wants to do, regardless of your plans. Glacier has easy hikes, shaded trails, trails in beautiful valleys, and of course some magnificent trails along the Continental Divide that have amazing views. Most of the trails are out and back, but there are also some loop trails and some one-way trails that require transportation back to the trailhead. I'll tell you how to arrange for that, too. For those of you who are new to the park, first let's say that there are 5 general areas, plus one that's accessed through the adjacent companion park in Canada called Waterton Lakes National Park. The Park Service website created a trail map for each of these 5 areas. These maps include data that can be confusing and, well, frankly, a little hard to figure out. But the website also lists distance and elevation gain information below the map. On the map itself, the trails are listed at the top of each map, along with the net elevation gain. So first, here's a brief overview of each area. Let's start with the Lake McDonald area. This is where most people enter the park, and it can be a bit crowded. The base elevation here is the lowest in the park, and most trails are well below the 6,000 to 6,900 foot tree line. So they're shaded, which is handy on hot days. Massive fires in 2017 and 2018 burned about 30,000 acres in this area. The mini glacier map covers trails in the northeast part of the park, which is my favorite. There are flat trails with great views, strenuous hikes with great views, and my favorite trail, which ends at a glacier. The North Fork and Goat Haunt map extend to the Canadian border. The North Fork area has many remote finger lakes, which are accessed via rough gravel roads. Goat Haunt can only be accessed from a trail or through Canada. The St. Mary map includes trails along the east side of the Sun Road and Logan Pass. Here you'll find easy access to waterfalls near the Sun Road, hikes to high mountain passes, and popular trails at Logan Pass. Two Medicine is in the southeast part of the park. From the time the park opened in 1910 until the Going to the Sun Road was completed in 1932, most park visitors arrive by train in the nearby town of East Glacier. Today, Two Medicine is less crowded than the other areas of the park, which is kind of odd because it has some amazing trails. So that covers the 5 maps, but there are also some great trails in the adjoining Waterton National Park, so I'll talk about a couple of these too. If you're not a hiker, there's another way to do a trail: by horse. At the end of the video, I'll list my favorite hikes, which I consider must-dos, and I'll have a list of what I would call second-tier hikes. One very important thing we need to talk about before hitting the trail is safety, including bear safety, moose and goat safety, even mountain lion safety. And well, I even saw a porcupine near my Swift Current cabin once. Even if you're not going to hike a trail, you need to read the park's info on bear safety. For legal reasons, I can't really describe it here. All I'm going to say is that it's very important for you to know how to be safe out here. I've hiked hundreds of miles in the park, and I've never seen a bear near me. But I always follow the rules, and rule number 1 is make noise. I have been close to goats and moose on trails, and even they can be dangerous. So please educate yourself, and maybe buy a can of bear spray when you get to the park, as it's not allowed on most airlines. And I've got one more housekeeping item before we start hiking. Glacier is a popular park, and at times it can be hard to get around. Up to 3 million people visit each year, and the vast majority do it in about the 3-month window when the Going to the Sun Road is open, which is usually in late June or early July, depending on the weather. And it usually closes in mid-September to October. And the park's lodges, well, they're not open year-round either. The lodges on the west side open in mid-May. The east side lodges don't open till a few weeks later, usually in early June, and they tend to close in mid-September, which is a couple of weeks earlier than the west side lodges. To help you get around, there is a form of mass transit. The park's website has a Getting Around page. Check it out at least once before heading here. There's border crossing info, typical driving times from the 5 park areas, and shuttle and tour information. The shuttle system has its own page, and even if you're planning on driving to trailheads every day, you may feel differently once you're here, so read it. The Hiker Shuttle is free along the Going to the Sun Road from St. Mary to Logan Pass, and on the west side it's free from Apgar to Logan Pass. The west side shuttles run every 15 to 30 minutes, but they only run every 40 minutes from St. Mary. Express service to Logan Pass starts at about 7 a.m. The regular service doesn't begin until 9 a.m. And the last bus leaves Logan Pass at 7 p.m., and you don't want to miss that one. Of course, these times are subject to change, so always check for yourself. And remember that there's no cell service in the park. Well, there's a little bit. Apgar generally can get it, but the rest of the park, you're not going to have any connection. I've heard that you can get some coverage if you have T-Mobile near St. Mary's, but the bulk of the park has absolutely no cell phone coverage. And yes, there's Wi-Fi in the park lodges, but it's very slow and frankly intermittent. Don't count on it. Because of size restrictions on the Sun Road, the shuttles are small and they only hold 12 to 20 people, and they're often full. So you may have to wait for a second or even a third bus. During peak times, hour waits are not unknown. There's another way to get around, and that's with a red bus. They have both shuttles and tours. The shuttles tend to operate only when the lodges are open. For a fee of $3 to $10, on the west side they can take you to and from the train station, or from Apgar to Lake McDonald. On the east side you can take a red bus from the Mini Glacier Hotel, or the Motor Inn, to the St. Mary Visitor Center. Glacier is beautiful, maybe too beautiful. Overcrowding is now a problem. In the last few years, about 3 million people have visited the park. That's up about 50% from 10 years ago. I was here when Al Gore visited. I hiked to Grinnell Glacier with his group. And by the early 2000s, media reports claimed that all the glaciers in the park would be gone by 2020, prompting millions to come to see them before they melted away. But 26 of the glaciers are still here. By the way, you still may find a few signs in the park that claim all the glaciers will be gone by 2020. They removed a few of them in 2019, but they didn't have enough money in the budget to remove all of the inaccurate signs. But even though the glaciers are still here, I bet overcrowding will continue to be an issue. The vast majority of visitors stay outside the park, meaning they drive in. This leads to traffic jams and full parking lots. Some parts of the park are even closed for hours each day because of overcrowding. Before your trip, monitor the park's parking status page and its road status page to see where and what time of day overcrowding starts to shut things down. And consider taking a red bus or hiker shuttle when you're in the park. If you're lucky enough to stay in the park, check with the hotel staff or a local ranger station before leaving for another area. Road congestion is also caused by road construction. Such delays are common on the Sun Road, and there may be closures at night too. In 2020 and 2021, the popular Mini Glacier Road will be reconstructed, and long delays are expected both in and out of the area. Let's talk about trip planning. A plan is important, but keep in mind that Glacier is not a theme park. Nature's plans may not coincide with yours. So first, plan for flexibility. Bear activity can close trails and campgrounds. Weather is unpredictable and can change quickly in the mountains. Forest fires can utterly ruin your plans. In recent years, my annual trip has been canceled twice because much of the park was on fire. And smoke from fires, even if they're hundreds of miles away, can make hiking and even breathing difficult, and for some, dangerous. So when planning a week to 10-day trip, I plan for at least one bad weather day. Your plans will also depend on if you're staying on the east or west side. Remember, it takes 2 to 3 hours to cross the park on the Sun Road. Keep in mind that those who are in really good shape have many more options when it comes to doing trails. I prefer 9 to 10-day trips, but most people stay for less than a week. So the itinerary I'm about to describe is for a 7-day stay. Let's say you arrive in the afternoon. So on day 1, get to know the area. Read over the park info they give you when you enter the park, and ask a ranger or hotel staff if any of the trails are closed. Ask where there have been wildlife sightings. Then explore your local area. Ask other visitors what they've done that they really enjoy. And take a short walk or hike just to see how the altitude is affecting you. Remember, the east side elevation is about 5,000 feet, and that's about 2,000 feet higher than it is on the west side near Lake McDonald. For dinner, or perhaps after dinner, visit one of the park's historic hotels, even if you're not staying at one. Many areas have ranger talks each night near a campground or in a hotel ballroom. In Mini Glacier, a ranger sets up a spotting scope in the Swift Current parking lot each evening. You may not be lucky enough to see a bear, but there's almost always something on one of the mountain ridges. And of course, you don't have to do all of these things on the first night. You've got 6 more. Whatever you do, don't just hang around in your room. It's far too beautiful out here. Rooms are for sleeping and writing in your journal. That's how I get the base material for these scripts. Unless I get to the park really early on day 1, I use my first full day in the park, day 2, to get used to the altitude and maybe do a short hike, but most importantly, that's the day I take a bunch of pictures. Drive to Going to the Sun Road, or take a bus tour to another area of the park that you haven't seen. It takes 2 to 3 hours to drive the 50-ish mile Going to the Sun Road. And if you're lucky enough to get a parking place at Logan Pass, stop and look around. You never know what you might see or photograph. But please remember, these are wild animals. Don't try to take a selfie with them. If you feel up to it, take an hour or so to hike out to my favorite lunch spot, with its great view of Heaven's Peak and the valley below. On the Sun Road, when you come to Sunriff Gorge, stop and take a look at the gorge, and maybe walk down to Bering Falls. It's not far. And don't miss one of my favorite photo ops in the park, Wild Goose Island Viewpoint. It's just a few steps from the Sun Road. Glacier is a great place for photographers and Instagrammers. And of course, remember that the east side of the park is lit by the sun in the morning, and the west side of the park is lit in the afternoon. And also remember, there is no phone service in most of the park. So instead of just taking a selfie, why not take something that's suitable for framing? By day 3, it's time to take a real hike, one of my must-do hikes. For first-time visitors who are physically fit, here is a list of my must-do hikes. Number 1, and my favorite hike in Glacier National Park, it's the Grinnell Glacier Trail. This is one of the few trails where you can actually walk up to a glacier. Number 2 on my list is the Highline Trail, from Logan Pass and connecting with the Swift Current Pass Trail all the way to Many Glacier. Now, number 3 is a tie, so I'm kind of cheating here. The Tarbagan Tunnel, Saya Pass, or Crypt Lake are all very nice hikes. And they're also a little bit more difficult. But there's also an easy one on my list, number 4, Bullhead Lake. So on day 3, if it's open, I suggest you do the Grinnell Glacier Trail first. It's my favorite hike and it's not too difficult. It takes me 2.5 to 3 hours of hard hiking to get up there, but I'm taking photos and videos at many of the beautiful spots along the way. And remember, this one is 3 miles shorter when you take the boat. For many, this is a tough day, but it's one you will never forget. Day 4. If you're tired and sore, maybe with a blister or two, you may want a day that doesn't have quite as much up as the Grinnell Glacier Trail. So the Highline Trail, which is up to 15.2 miles long, might be a good option for you, because it has only about 800 feet of up when you go all the way down the Swift Current. The 15.2 mile version from Logan Pass to Many Glacier, well, it takes me about 8 hours. Now, if that's too much for you, consider just going down to the Loop. That's only 12 miles long, and it has only 330 feet of up, but you'll need the Hiker Shuttle to get back to Logan Pass. Both routes go down about 2,300 feet, and remember that hiking poles make descending much easier on the knees. If either of those routes are just too long for you, consider just taking the 2 to 3 hours to go out to my lunch spot and back. It's a great hike, and because it doesn't take that much time, you can do another trail, like Hidden Lake. Okay, now we're at day 5. After 2 relatively hard days, I plan for an easy one, and Bullhead Lake is perfect. It's an 8-mile round trip that feels relatively flat. They say it goes up and down about 400 feet, but really you can't tell. Day 6. Well, since yesterday was a pretty easy day, it's time for another tough hike. So this would be one of my number 3s, the Tarbagan Tunnel, Saya Pass, or Crypt Lake. Any of these trails will make for a very memorable last day. But these hikes should only be done by people who are in really pretty darn good shape, because these are pretty tough. If that doesn't include you, well, consider doing one of my second-tier hikes, like Iceberg Lake. On day 7, getaway day, get up before the sun to see Glacier at daybreak. I do this nearly every day to capture images and get time-lapse sunrises. Glacier looks incredible at dawn, and everyone should experience this at least once when they come to Glacier. If I don't have to leave until midday, I'll also try to do a short hike before I leave. The Falls hike from the Sun Road, the Trail of the Cedars on the west side, or maybe even a jaunt out to my lunch spot if I have to cross through the park. Basically, take in as much as possible. You may have noticed that I haven't said too much about nighttime activities. For me, nights are for contemplation and wonder. But I know that's not for everyone. Most of the park's hotels have entertainment at night, and I mentioned the Ranger Talks. Hotels also offer fine dining and a bar, and the bars, unlike your room, have a TV. Regrettably, kids can play online video games in the lobby at night, while the rest of us take in the incredible ambience of the place. If you're a young couple, remember that the walls in these old hotels are very thin. Even in the dark, Glacier is amazing. This is a great place for stargazing, especially when there's a new moon. The altitude and clear sky means a city dweller will see more stars than they've ever seen before. You can't do all the great trails in the park on one trip, and any trail may be closed for any number of reasons. So here's a list of my top-tier must-do hikes to choose from. First, of course, is the Grinnell Glacier Trail. The Trail of the Cedars is number 2, followed by the Highline Trail, and that means just about any version of it, including my lunch spot. The Tarbingen Tunnel, Saya Pass, Bullhead Lake, Crypt Lake, and St. Mary's Falls are all hikes that you should do at least once. But if any of those trails are closed, or if some of them are just too hard for you, these trails are on my second tier of great hikes. Iceberg Lake, Grinnell Lake, Piegan Pass, Swift Current Pass, Dawson Pass, Virginia Falls, Hidden Lake, Avalanche Lake, Abercrombie Falls, Fisher Cap Lake to see the moose, and Sperry Chalet. There are likely plenty of other nice trails out there that I haven't done, and I hope that you'll tell me about them in the comments. So what do you do if the weather is bad? Well, first, come prepared. Bring Gore-Tex versions of everything from shoes to hat and gloves, and hike anyway. On one of my first trips to the park, I spent several hours on one rainy day just hanging out in the Many Glacier Hotel. The ever-changing view out the large-scale windows, and the warmth and smells of the fireplace made for a remarkably pleasant day. Well, for several hours anyway. And remember, the weather can be quite different on either side of the park. If it's raining on the side you're on, check with a ranger or hotel staff to see where it might not be raining. On more than one occasion, I've just driven to another area and done hikes over there. Forest fires are a bigger problem. I canceled a couple of my recent annual trips because of large fires late in the season. Fire smoke, even from distant fires, can make hiking difficult and even dangerous. Bear activity can also cause trails and campgrounds to be closed. Remember, this is not a theme park. Mother Nature is not your mom. And like your mom, she has no favorites. But nature isn't the only thing that can hurt your trip. Glacier has become a victim of its own success. Crowds have made travel, and especially parking, a big problem. And you can see the parking lot status on the website. And remember, you can also find road status information on the website. Too many cars can cause rangers to close road access to popular areas of the park. I think the best way to combat overcrowding is to start early, but not in the dark. By the way, bears and other animals like to drink in the lakes and streams early in the morning, so be alert and be careful. For many, Glacier is a once-in-a-lifetime trip, but for me and countless others, we keep coming back because you just can't do all these trails in 1 week. If you're not a hiker, there's another way to see Glacier's backcountry. On horseback, a vendor provides trail rides of various length in several areas of the park. A full-day ride can take you to Cracker Lake. It's probably the bluest lake in the park. In 2017, a massive forest fire destroyed the remote Sperry Chalet. It's been rebuilt, and instead of taking a very difficult hike, you can once again ride up there. Overnight rides are also available. Another way to see the park is by boat. Tours are available in most areas of the park, and there's one in Waterton Lakes, too. I've been on all of them, and they're a nice way to relax after a long hike. Or perhaps on a day when you want to let the blisters heal a bit. I hope this video helps you plan your trip. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, and maybe write a comment. I read every single one of them, and they're quite helpful when the time comes to update the video. To see future updates and dozens of other travel videos, subscribe to this channel. And for the more philanthropic of you, why not contribute to this channel? Even if you watch the ads, we only get about a half a penny for each view. And that won't even cover the cost of travel, let alone the cost of equipment and writing and editing time. If you're looking for more information on Glacier, don't forget I have another 90-minute documentary called Glacier, the Hiker National Park. It's also available on my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and come on out to Glacier, my favorite national park. And I think you'll agree, this place is special.